Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chelsea, and in this video, I am going to talk about my experience moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma from Atlanta, Georgia for $10,000. Now, in this video, I really wanted to talk, holistically about my entire experience. So first I'm going to talk about, why I chose to do the Tulsa Remote program. What is the Tulsa Remote program? And some key components about my experience. So that includes community, finances, dating, and just some advice for folks who may be considering the program. I thought it was really important to do this video because when I was considering moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma, as part of Tulsa Remote, I had such a hard time finding resources, specifically about the experiences of Black people like myself who were currently living in Tulsa as a result of Tulsa Remote. When I got on Google, every single time I would type in, Black people in Tulsa, or I would type in I would try to do research about Black people living in Tulsa. I mean, I saw on the US Census that there was 14 to 15% of Black people living in Tulsa. I knew that Tulsa was highly segregated. And so for me, I wanted to know what those experiences of people were like. And so Tulsa Remote they give you kind of limited access to a Slack community at first. And at first, I wasn't aware that there was a specific Slack community for Black people. And so for me, I was having a really hard time finding Black people, current day to connect with. Every time I would type in Black people in Tulsa, it would say the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. And so, I don't know if folks are educated about the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, but that was when white mobsters, white people bombed Black Wall Street, right? And so all these thriving businesses, were completely shattered overnight. And so I really wanted to find what are Black people in Tulsa's lives, Black people who are like me, young professionals' lives today like. And I was getting very limited access to that community from, Tulsa Remote. So I was having a hard time really deciding if it was something I wanted to do. And so I found a YouTube video by a Tulsa Remoter. And, she really went in depth with some other Tulsa Remote people who were Black about the experience. And her video was pretty much the only thing that I found that was really helpful for me in making my decision. And so as a result of that, this is my attempt to contribute to that literature. Of course, those who know me know that I'm an academic at heart. And so when we think about creating new epistemologies and we think about creating new literature, this is my contribution to the body of literature as it relates to, this specific topic. Okay, so let's jump in. Let's talk about why I decided to do Tulsa Remote. So I graduated graduate school in 2019. I had just finished my master's degree, and at that time, I accepted a job offer in Atlanta, Georgia. And so, we weren't in the remote era yet. So obviously that job was 100% in person. And so, going to Atlanta was just, it was what made sense, right? I wasn't interested in living in Atlanta before that. I had applied to jobs pretty much everywhere. So, that job was the one that I felt most excited about and felt like the right decision for me. So I went to Atlanta. And I lived in Atlanta for about 3.5 years. So when I first moved to Atlanta, I was 23, turning 24. And when I left Atlanta, I was 27, turning 28. So I spent a really, pivotal chunk of my 20s in Atlanta. And so moving there in 2019, as you can imagine, in 2020, I had been in Atlanta for about 8 months before the pandemic kicked in. I found that in my time in Atlanta, that first 2 years, year and a half, I really struggled making friends. A lot of my community was from work. It was people that I knew at work. I have family in Atlanta. And so I struggled. And there were often times where I felt a profound sense of loneliness. A lot of my friendships at that point were long distance. So, if I really wanted community, I either had to travel to those people or I had to, rely on work friends, which can be really challenging, right? Just because, you work with these people. And so, when I moved to Atlanta, I was in a long distance relationship. And once that ended, I feel like I really tried to fill that void, you know, through dating. I dated quite a few people during my time there. And so I was in this era of just, I didn't really feel connected to, I didn't feel like I was part of a community in Atlanta. When I left that job in Atlanta, I decided to move to a different part of Atlanta. I moved to Buckhead. I was previously in the North Decatur, North Druid Hills area. And when I moved to Buckhead, I think that's when I realized, like, what am I doing here in Atlanta? Like, really, what am I doing here? I had gotten a job that had given me, that was the era of like everybody transitioning to tech. And I thankfully was able to successfully transition to tech. And so I had gotten a job and was given an opportunity. And, I was transitioning out of education. So I was making so much more money. And so, I was like, I'm going to move to a different side of Atlanta and try to do Atlanta. My job was fully remote. And that's when I realized that I didn't want to be in Atlanta anymore. One, I felt like I was making way more than I ever thought I was going to make in my life, honestly. And I was still struggling to really, pay rent and make life for myself in a meaningful way, right? Like, I wouldn't say I was in a situation that was terrible, but I mean, I was paying almost $2,000 in rent just to have a roof over my head. And it was rough. Like, it was rough. It wasn't, I don't want to say it was rough. Like, I was out here, like, about to, nothing crazy happened, but I wasn't living the quality of life that I wanted to live, right? Like, I didn't, I wasn't in any significant debt or anything like that as a result of that experience, but I just felt like I was literally working just to have a roof over my head. And especially that last year as well, I had made some connections through yoga. I had made some friends that, were there, but I didn't really feel like I was part of a community. Like, I felt really isolated in Atlanta. I felt very alone oftentimes. And even though I had friends, that, I was super thankful for, and I am super thankful for those that I maintained connections with, I was just really missing the community and also like, missing community, and then not really feeling like Atlanta was where I was supposed to be. And so I just remember wanting to move. I knew I wanted to move. I was like, I gotta leave Atlanta. And so when I made the decision that I wanted to move, I didn't know where I wanted to go. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go back to Columbus, Ohio. But wasn't really feeling called to do that, which is, Columbus, Ohio is where I grew up and where I'm from. I wasn't feeling super called to do that. Wasn't feeling, I looked at Charlotte, cost of living was similar. And so I just knew that I wanted to leave Atlanta. And so one day I started looking at places like, I think on the internet where I could move. And I had heard that places were paying you to move, and Tulsa Remote kept coming up as the number one program. Like, oh, people were moving to Tulsa and they were getting paid $10,000 to do it. And so I launched into research. Anytime before I make any decision, I research it pretty extensively. And so I did all the research. I think I did research for about a few weeks and decided to apply. I applied. It was like 1 a.m, I think July 2022. And then I ended up getting in a few weeks later. I had a pretty easy interview. I remember the day after I had my interview, I was accepted to the program. And so once I got accepted to the program, I'm not gonna lie, it was hard for me to make a decision. I was like, I could stay in Atlanta and, try to see if this is what I still want to do. I could go back to Columbus, or I can move to Tulsa. I tried to convince myself to do something else. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Columbus. I'm not going to do that. Da, da, da. But literally every single time I tried to consider something else, my heart was telling me that I needed to come to Tulsa. I tell people Tulsa is not a place where you just like get up and go to. It's a place that you're called. I truly felt like, and for me, I identify as a Christian woman. For me, I felt like God was calling me to Tulsa. It was literally the only decision at that time that I would think about that felt like the right decision. So I decided to visit Tulsa. I visited Tulsa in November 2022. And I'm not going to lie, when I got here, I was shocked. I mean, it was a culture shock. I remember landing in Tulsa and I was like, oh my gosh, where am I? What am I doing? I got a rental car and I was driving around and I had to meet up for a tour with some of the other people, in Tulsa Remote that were considering moving here. And I remember calling one of my friends before the tour, like bawling my eyes out and telling her, like, yo, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing? I feel super lost. I don't know if this is the right decision. And, she encouraged me to, just stay open minded and not to put too much pressure on myself. So I went through the tour. I'm not going to lie, that visit to Tulsa did not sell me. I was not sold through that visit. I just was like, I don't really know. This is not giving. But it didn't sell me. And I think ultimately, even going back to Atlanta, and I kept thinking about it, in my gut, I was still being told that I should still go, even despite the fact that when I went, I wasn't impressed. And so I had to follow that intuition. I had to trust that that's what God wanted me to do. And so I decided to go. And that's really why. And I came to Tulsa primarily looking for a lower cost of living place to live. I was looking for a tighter knit community, and I was looking for just a place where I could try new things and really just, be myself. That was really what I was looking for. So the next thing I want to talk about is community. And so when I chose to move to Tulsa, I think one thing that when people move to Tulsa, you know, I don't get me wrong. The rent in Tulsa is significantly cheaper than, anywhere else right now, but it wasn't as cheap as I wanted it to be. And so I was like, one of the most meaningful ways to really, grow your financial future is to cut your living expenses. It's not going to be the Starbucks. It's not going to be those things. You need to make a specific drastic cut to your living expenses to make a difference. So I decided that I wanted to get a roommate. That was not something that I thought I would do. But, coming to Tulsa, knowing that I was going to be a Black woman who didn't know anyone, I was like, you know what? I think, getting a place and having a roommate is a good decision. Ideally a Black roommate, because if something happens to me, God forbid, I want someone who lives with me, who knows, when I'm supposed to come and go to be around. So I was really lucky. I mean, I can't even stress how lucky I was to find my roommate. Like, I can't even express that right now. She had just bought a house and she was looking for someone to rent out a room. It came completely furnished. It was super affordable. I mean, way more affordable than I could have even asked for. And so when I came on my visit, I actually met her, and, she was considering other people, but ultimately she chose me, and it was such a great decision. Really happy that I did that. And so she was the first person that I felt like I was really building community with, because, I was living with someone. In terms of outside of building, community there, one thing I learned, my experience in building community here in Tulsa, is you have to show up in Tulsa. Tulsa is not, if you are the kind of person who, you live in Atlanta, you live in Dallas, you live in these places that, you got to drive. In Tulsa, you can drive 6 miles in about 10 minutes. So, you kind of get accustomed to staying home, and you kind of like, there's just so much hassle when you want to go out. That's not the case in Tulsa. So Tulsa Remote puts on quite a lot of events, I would say, like so many events throughout the year. And then I also started finding other events. And what ended up happening was I kept showing up. If you're going to move to Tulsa and, you're the kind of person that wants to build community, you have to show up. You have to show up. Luckily, I live 2-3 minutes north of downtown. So oftentimes a lot of events were close by to me. Like, I could just hop in my car and get there in 10 minutes or less. And so at the beginning, I was going to events. I was talking to people, to really build community. I think the cool thing about Tulsa Remote is that, like, everybody's friendly, right? Like, people move here every single month. And so everyone's either looking for new friends, or they're like, you know what I mean? Like, or people are new. So no one's going to feel some type of way. It's not like weird here to just go up and talk to somebody new. Like, that's normal. And so I loved that. Another thing I learned pretty quickly is that Tulsa is very small. Like, I cannot express this to you enough. Tulsa is very, very, very small. There are great parts about that and not so great parts about that. But because Tulsa is so small, you pretty much see a lot of the same people everywhere. And it's a very tight knit community. And so I loved that because, coming from feeling isolated in Atlanta, I loved that. I was able to meet like I would say my lifelong friends here. So which is crazy because, coming to Tulsa, again, like I was in flux in where I was feeling about my friendships coming out of Atlanta, and coming to Tulsa, I feel like I got way more than I could have imagined when it comes to friendships. And so um, I had connected with with someone on Slack who had also previously gone to the same institution as me, had also lived in Atlanta, and then she connected me with another girl, and so the three of us started talking. Once I moved to Tulsa, one of them, she invited all of us out, a group of people that she had met, and guess what, guys? We became a friend group. And, those people, my friends, they know who they are. They're watching this. Like, we stuck together the entire time. We did so many events together. I think I saw them probably every week. And I think that was another thing I found about Tulsa. I feel like in Atlanta and other big cities, you make plans with friends. It's like, oh, you're making them 2 weeks out. Like making plans with people here is like, oh, you want to go to dinner tonight? Like, sure, why not? And you could just make it happen that same day. And I loved that. And so, we were able to really spend a lot of time together. And I love that. Like, I think that we're in this era right now. I've noticed like a lot of people are like, oh, I love low maintenance friends, low maintenance friends. I'm not someone that likes low maintenance friends for the most part. Like, there are some people I'm okay having low maintenance friendships with, like, because we're just, because of distance or certain people. But at that point in my life, moving here and just like wanting more community, I kind of wanted something more high maintenance. And so I found myself really, getting that, and that we were really leaning on each other. We had all just moved here. We were Black. We were trying to figure it out. We had all had different life experiences that brought us to this point. And so I feel like I really was able to focus on those friendships and really nurture them in a way that I really needed, that really healed me, right? And so I feel like I've been able to build such a strong community here as a result. Tulsa summer is really fun. There's a lots of things that happen. There's so many things that happen this summer. I was so busy in the summer. I would say I went out so much here in the summer. And it was just because of that community. So overall, community wise, I've had such a positive experience. I mean, if you need anything in Tulsa Remote, you have access to like thousands of people. If you have a question, if you need to borrow something, like people are so kind here, and I can't express that enough. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is finances. And so I talked a lot about this in terms of wanting to find somewhere more affordable. And so just to just be authentic about it. So when I lived in Atlanta, I would say I was spending about 40% of my monthly paycheck. I had multiple streams of income at the time because I was teaching yoga and I had like a 9 to 5 remote job. I was still spending about 40% of my expenses at that time on living expenses. I mean, that's like the Wi-Fi, putting a roof over my head. Again, very much feeling like I was just working to live. When I moved here, I reduced my living expenses from 40% to 14%. And so that was really, really significant for me. It was the first time in my life where I felt like I was making a great amount of money and could really save, invest, Roth, pay down student loans, like, and do things that like I really, really wanted to do. And I also felt like I was living a higher quality of life. If you know me personally this year, I started the year out in Hawaii. I went to Ghana. Like I had money to travel. I had money to just do things more comfortably. And don't get me wrong, in the past I've been able to travel and I've been able to do those things, but definitely not to the degree that I was able to this past year. 2022, I did not travel at all. I went to work trips and I went home to visit family. But 2023 was the first year that I was able to like travel. And it was because I had cut my living expenses so much and I had saved so much money and was really like learning about and just changed my financial life. Like really changed my financial life in a way that I was comfortable spending money, but I was also just able to just move and breathe. And it was because I moved to Tulsa. And that has been super significant for me. And just has also Tulsa community gives you a lot of resources in terms of like what you're able to do. And, if you want to learn about certain financial topics, I feel like there's a lot of that here. The other thing I also wanted to talk about when it comes to finances is I would say, like, for me, you come here because you're getting paid $10,000. So I would say, there's two ways. They might give you the $10,000 up front if you want to buy a house, or, you get more moderated payments if you rent. So I was getting an extra payment every month. So it was like I had another stream of income. And for me, I saved all of that money. So it was really nice because I was able to really use, my 9 to 5 to, fund my daily life. But then I was able to save all of my, TR money, just for a rainy day and do other things too. Some other things that I've been able to do here financially that I wasn't able to do before. The air conditioner in my car had broken like 2022 summer when I was in Georgia. Any of my friends remember that time? And like I got it fixed here for a cheaper option. So I was able to have the financial capital to get my air conditioning fixed. I was able to get my car windows tinted, which is something that I always wanted. Like I was just able to do things that I haven't been able to do and financially. So it was a great decision for me financially. Next thing I wanted to talk about was dating. And so I do want to acknowledge that, most of my experience here, I was in a long distance relationship. And so when I moved away from Atlanta, I was in a relationship and, we decided to end that relationship because I was moving, but then we just kept talking to each other. And so we decided to try long distance and we did long distance for most of my experience here. So I can't really say, and so to be honest, I haven't had that much dating experience here because I was in a relationship most of the time here. I would say that I had a little bit. So in the time in which, we were still figuring, things out, we weren't together, anything like that. There was a time period where I did date very briefly. And it was a positive dating experience. I dated someone outside of my race. That was the first time I had done that. And it was positive. It was super positive. And honestly, that relationship would have probably went all the way if we just didn't want different things and have different backgrounds. So this was someone who wanted to stay in Oklahoma their whole life, and I did not. And so I just knew that ultimately we were going in different directions. And so all I really have to say about dating is mostly through friends and things like that. But I would say if you're someone, especially a Black woman, and you're coming here and you're looking to date, it's not impossible. I think you have to be open. You have to be very open to something different. And you also have to know that Tulsa's very small. So, if you date someone, the chances of you seeing them around, kind of high. If you're dating outside in the Tulsa suburbs, maybe you won't see them as much. But, dating here, I would say it's not the easiest thing for a lot of Black women in my experience that I've observed. It's really not. So I feel like that's why, on top of being in a long distance relationship, I feel like my long distance relationship gave me space to really focus on my friendships, which really grew me. And even if I didn't have that long distance relationship, I feel like I was, I just had so much more mental capacity to really focus on cultivating community and friends because the dating here just wasn't that great. And so, yeah. And yeah, I think overall, my biggest pieces of advice for people who are looking, to, come to Tulsa Remote or come to Tulsa or even just move anywhere is first and foremost, you have to be a risk taker. You have to be someone that is willing to take risks. You have to be someone that is okay with, being uncomfortable. I remember the day that my sister and my mom were driving me to the airport. And I remember I was about to leave. I was getting my stuff together and I just started bawling my eyes out and crying. And my sister and my mom were like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong? Are you okay?" And I just told them, I was like, "I'm so scared. I'm so scared. It's Oklahoma." I was like, am I going to get lynched? Am I going to survive this experience? And, they kept reminding me that this experience didn't have to be permanent and I could leave at any point. And to be honest with you, there was a point in March where I was feeling weird about my experience and I went home for about a week and reevaluated and chose to come back. And a lot of that was coming from just being a little lost about where I was in life and really wanting to, and just feeling had I made the right decision? And ultimately now I can say I did. But yeah, I would say you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. The pace of life here in Tulsa is a lot slower, so it'll give you space to really think about things and think about things and, yeah, just think about things that you maybe haven't thought about in a while. I think my other piece of advice is like have your support systems outside of Tulsa. So I've been going to therapy for this is my 5th year. And so I still have a relationship with my therapist. And so she has been on this entire therapy journey with me the whole time. I mean, not therapy journey, but also Tulsa journey the whole time. And so it was so powerful to really have her to kind of process this whole experience with, when things were coming up for me. And so have your people. I also feel like I have, friends that don't live here in Tulsa that I kept in touch with pretty consistently that I was able to visit that were also a source of support for me. And so, keep those connections close. Talk to your family and friends about how you're feeling as well. Another piece of advice so yeah, moving to Oklahoma as a Black woman was hard, right? It's hard. I think people in Oklahoma here, they're nice, but like, don't make no mistake, you guys. Like, it's Oklahoma, and you will see that. You will see, I've seen people in Confederate, outfits. I have seen Trump signs. I have seen it all. And it's very scary. I think once you build community, make sure people have your location, wear your Apple Watch. I have a roommate and I did that on purpose because I wanted someone around who, kind of knew my pattern of behavior and could raise a red flag if something happened to me. So kind of do what you need to do to make yourself feel safe. I tinted my windows partially because I didn't want my car to be a fishbowl, and then everybody saw me driving by like, oh, that's a Black girl, right? So that was hard. I also chose to specifically live in a Black area. So I live in North Tulsa, which is predominantly Black. And I chose to live here because I knew I wanted to live around Black people. And so my neighbors are Black. I have multiple Black neighbors. Pretty much most of this neighborhood is Black. And I'm right near Black Wall Street, Greenwood. And so I did that intentionally because I really wanted to make sure that, I was around Black people. Other pieces of advice is like, it's going to go by fast. It's really going to go by really fast. And so don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. Have fun, meet people, push yourself out here. Please do not move to Tulsa and then stay in the house and complain about how you haven't met anyone. If you want to do that in another city. Because Tulsa's not the place where you can do that, especially as a Black person. Really build community, take advantage of the resources. There's so much entrepreneurship here. There's so many connections here, so much networking. Like, really make sure that you're leaning into those opportunities for yourself. I think that that's really, really important. Don't take yourself too seriously. Have a lot of fun. And, yeah, I think just enjoy yourself and have fun. Otherwise, that's my Tulsa Remote experience. All in all, I am so happy that I did it. I think that moving to Tulsa is the scariest thing I've ever done. And, I have plans. I'm not staying in Tulsa. I have plans to move on to a new city. As of now, I'm still consulting the Lord about it. If there is a situation where I do end up staying, that's okay too. But yeah, I think it was a really great decision for me. And I remember, family and friends thinking that I was crazy. I mean, people thought I was crazy when I told them I was moving to Tulsa, and people still think I'm crazy. But again, you have to be a certain kind of person to make these kind of decisions. And I'm just so proud of the ways in which I've grown. I'm proud of the community that I've made. And I'm just proud of myself for really just, leaning into this experience and the growth I've experienced. And I'm so thankful to God for, keeping me through this time. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for watching this YouTube video. I hope it's helpful for you, and I will see y'all soon. Bye.